Maybe like many other people, for me the temple is the temple of the heart, but also the natural world, which is why pilgrimage is, for me, so important. It hasn't so much to do with, hauling people to a sacred place. What it really has to do with is the experience of stripping down, of giving away, of practicing dana every step that you take. What I've been trying to do over these many years of being, in a way, a constant pilgrim, is to realize that you really need nothing. You just need to go with a very open heart, with that spirit of not knowing, ready to bear witness to whatever arises and ready to endure whatever hardships unfold. And in fact, it's the hardships that build character. And just as Tenzin was explaining, when it rains in a holy place, or snows, or when the wind is violent, that's a way for the place to be renewed. So that the obstacles that we encounter as we go on pilgrimage have nothing to do with institutionalized religion. They have to do with exposing ourselves, opening ourselves to the world of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Well, actually, the sequence of the elements as we articulate them is the sequence that is followed in the dissolution process at the time of dying. So earth dissolves into water, water into fire, fire into air, and air into space. So that's something very few people, except maybe a Tibetan practitioner, might realize, that we're actually doing a teaching there on the dissolution process. But from another point of view, everything is made up of the mother elements. And when the lifespan is complete, then everything goes back to the mother elements. And we don't really consider ourselves, from the perspective of being composed of constituents, elemental constituents in this way. So this prayer is one to remind us: earth, water, fire, air, and space combine to make this food. And then we say numberless beings gave their lives in labor. And, we rarely consider the fact of how many beings die in the agricultural experience or in agricultural activity. And then, how complicated it is for, one pancake to be made. It's the eggs and the milk, and it's the grain, and, it's where all these things came from. And so this is, and then this is a way to remind people of, hey, a lot goes on with the food. I mean, in fact, another way of saying it, and this is Thich Nhat Hanh's way, in this plate of food, I see the entire universe supporting my existence. Then the last line goes, may we be nourished, that we may nourish life. And so, it's that we're not just taking food in greedily, but we are returning with gratitude this energy that we've received from the whole world, the whole universe, in fact. We return it so that we can take care of life.
is the principal form from which all of these 8 emanate. If you look at the building outside to the right of this, you'll see that the outer walls are just a shell, and that inside there is nothing but rubble. That's exactly how this main assembly hall was left in the 1960s, at the time of its devastation. Well, they would use dynamite, explosives, manpower, and of course there were many sacred objects that were not destroyed but spirited off into the international antique market, and many of these are to be found in the West. During the 1980s they did rebuild, but the quality of the workmanship was poor, and the temple was destroyed by a fire. The rebuilding on a grander scale took place in the late 90s, thanks mostly to the patrons of Tulku Khalsang, the regenerator of Dzogchen Monastery, many of whom are Chinese, ethnic Chinese by birth.
In Zen, for example, we don't reference so much the old stories about the Buddha or that the Buddha told, but we actually reference current events, what's happening right here, right now. So here we are, a circle of people being purified by the elements, seeing our own stuff arise, trying to mediate differences between people, trying to help people understand that they are not their personalities, trying to help people grow duck feathers, where the water of suffering, it doesn't soak through and kill you. So the pilgrimage itself is a living parable from the perspective of my own experience, and I think many people's experience. I mean, it's also a rite of passage. And of course, the practice itself is a rite of passage. We went through an experience of separation, leaving our comfortable homes, our privileged life, our work. We then entered into a threshold experience, or stepping across the doorway, if you will, into a world which is very difficult for us to assimilate because we're so spoiled. And we're really toys of our own emotions. And so, we're worked because we have been asked, I've asked everybody, stay the course. Don't abandon the pilgrimage. Because what's very important is the determination to stay with the process. Just as the Buddha was determined in his own enlightenment experience to stay through the process where Mara is confronting him with the experience of desire, with his daughter showing up and trying to seduce him, or his army showing up, Mara's army showing up and trying to assault him. So this is the story. It's unfolding every step that we take. And it is a kind of embodiment of the Four Noble Truths. I mean, we're walking the Eightfold Path every step that we take on the pilgrimage. So part of the challenge here is to gently set a perspective in place so people don't identify with the story in such a way that they get lost in it. But they understand, thank you very much for this difficult experience. This is teaching me right now. So the snow, being caught in the snowstorm, that was a teaching. How do we actually manifest some kind of resilience when the heavens open up and dump a lot of snow on us on our sort of first day out in the, big natural world? I've used the metaphor of strong back, that is equanimity, a tremendous amount of resilience, not breaking apart by being brittle, but having that strong back of flexibility, sitting like a mountain, soft front, being open to the truth of suffering as it is. Because really, without the suffering, our lives don't have depth and meaning. So the suffering is the bridge to compassion. But almost everybody I know is trying to get away from suffering instead of accepting suffering and really working with it in a very direct way. So in meditation, you've got a structure, a really powerful structure. which is the request of the teacher to stay in the schedule, no matter what comes up for you. And that's the same request that I'm making of all of the pilgrims. Stay the course. You will want to abandon the situation. You'll want to abandon the pilgrimage. You'll want to return to the comforts of your low-altitude life. But we need people who have we need people who have character, not who are caricatures. And most people in the West are kind of caricatures. They're kind of pursuing completely silly things. And part of my purpose in life has been to, through the encounter with suffering, my own and the suffering of many other beings, is to derive some kind of inner strength to be able to go deeper into the suffering in the world and to try to serve the situation in a skillful way, if at all possible. I'm hoping that that same sensibility, which is shared by some of the people here, will be actualized by all of the people here. I think there are many ways to express a Buddhist practice, and all of them are valid. For example, the hermit does his or her work, and the communities that engage in intensive practice constantly do their work. Our work at Upaya is about bringing together social action, social service, and meditation. And there's a difference between social action and social service. That's really an important distinction. Social action has to do with the transformation of institutions that are engaging in structural violence. In other words, engaging in practices that are based in systems of injustice, whether it's economic injustice or gender injustice, cultural or ethnic injustice, and so forth. And then social service is the direct service to people who are suffering. So at Upaya, for example, we're very well known for our work in the prison system and our work with dying people.
Yeah, we're up here at the Tiger's Lair. There are 9 monks in retreat from 3 years to 5 years, and a couple of them are ill, including the man who's precepting the retreat. And we're not able to talk directly to the monks because we don't want them to break retreat, and they don't want to break retreat. But the head man himself has some stomach pains and some aches and pains in his legs, and it sounds like the monk that is the most ill has headaches and sciatic pain for the last year, and some other difficulties which we're working on getting some medicine to him sight unseen, but with the translation from the abbot here. Pretty typical stuff. So we brought all the right kind of medication for this, and it would be nice to really do an examination and find out for sure, but we're treating sort of empirically just based on what we're told here. Well, it seems like a lot is related to stress, emotional stress of the monks in their monastic life. The weather is quite harsh, so there's a lot of respiratory and other things, brought about by the smoky atmosphere of inside the homes. Why can't they deal with their own problems, with their own medications? They can to some degree. I mean, they don't have referral to tertiary care facilities, but they can treat symptomatically to some degree based on their many thousands of year old system here. No, I think they've got to rely on what's available locally, and there's also certain Chinese medicine now available, but a lot of what we're seeing here isn't life-threatening. It's just very debilitating and inconvenient, but they'll survive it. The patients that have required surgery, and we saw prostate cancer and various hernias and liver abscesses, the surgical things, I think, that are simply treated by surgery in the West, in the rest of the world.
This pilgrimage includes a number of clinicians who want to bring the best of Western medicine to areas that seriously don't have access to it. And we certainly saw that in Sechen Monastery and also Dzogchen Monastery. And it was also very much inspired by the work of Mathieu Ricard, who set up clinics there and encouraged us to come, as did Raphael de Mandra. So it becomes a very powerful experience to, dissociate from our culture and our medical corporations, and to come to a place which is so remote and so physically difficult to survive in, and to be with people who have a lot of ailments, but they're not suffering. And that's quite a teaching for our clinicians. In other words, the sense of complaint and self-pity is not so present. But we can be of great service. After all, we had the opportunity, for example, to 3 children have already had surgery for life-threatening conditions as a result of us facilitating their evacuation from the Sechen area. An old woman who, actually a lot younger than me, but who was very cachectic and had some kind of a liver abscess, was through our means sent to Chengdu and is being strengthened so that she can undergo surgery, and a 4th boy will be sent to Lhasa for surgery, orthopedic surgery. So these kinds of interventions are something that a Tibetan nomad simply can't afford. We easily can take care of this, And, you know, this kind of intervention is literally life-saving for individuals.
Thing to know about. And Raphael thinks a lot of the physical pain in the belly that we've been treating with Pepsid is actually maybe worms. They don't like to talk about it.
How old is she?
So I'm first going to check her ear to see her temperature. This is a tympanic thermometer. It's relatively effective. So right now it's 95.3, which is cold. So I'm going to check her other ear to see if that's stable. So this one says 97.1, so that's more accurate. So I'm going to take this temperature.
This is for your tummy, for the worms. And you're going to take one in the morning, one at night for 3 days. And can you read this for me? Can she read this for me? Tell me how to take it.
넌 그랬어. 얘기가 넌 돈했어. 내 기돈이야. 넌 그래.
뭐래는 것이래. 근데 이거 좀 때문에 너 의사도 된 맞은 데 야보래셔서 치서서.
How can I say this? The teachings of the Buddha have reached across the world in a much more expanded way than I'm sure the Buddha would ever have anticipated himself. I think Buddhism has adapted itself to every place it has traveled to or been brought to. And it wasn't as though I set out to create a new kind of Buddhism. It's more that I did what came naturally. I'm a woman, which is wonderful gesture because the earth bears witness. Gives me a tremendous advantage to innovate. You know, if you're a woman, you're maybe in some way expected to fail or not to stay within the conventional. So that was a tremendous advantage. And then an anthropologist who specialized in cross-cultural anthropology and medical anthropology. So from many points of view, looking out through many sets of eyes in many different cultures. And also my own history, personal history of being quite ill at various times in my life and wanting to provide, you know, care, not just a contemplative Buddhism, but a Buddhism of social action seemed just a natural thing to do. It was not until the 80s that I realized that Buddhism was developing or emerging in a form that would express itself in terms of social action and social service and compassion to the degree that it is in Western culture. The world is in crisis today, and antiquarian Buddhism will serve a small group of people, but Buddhism has always responded to circumstances, and the circumstances that are affecting all of our lives are global in nature. So as such, I hope that the Buddhism that is evolving through me and other people will have global significance. The forest is something that is deeply venerated in Buddhism, really in all of Buddhism, because it's a place of refuge. And if we look at it from the point of view of modern science, it's the lungs of our planet. It's how our planet breathes. But it's also a place that reflects in the psyche in an interesting way, because it has a very yin quality, very feminine quality. And because in European mythology, the feminine is often characterized as having malevolent qualities, the forest has been a place where bad spirits were to be found. On the contrary, in the Buddhist world, the forest is a place where the hermits are to be found. and people go to the forest. They seek a place, a forest refuge, in a certain way to emulate the life of the Buddha who attained enlightenment under a tree. And the tree is a very important symbol across the world because it represents the whole cosmos. The roots of the tree go into the underworld, into the deep unconscious. Represents the capacity of the psyche to penetrate deeply. The trunk of the tree transects the present moment, and the crown of the tree embraces the heaven. And then one of the most powerful images in world mythology is of the flowering tree, is the tree with a flower. And this is the blossom, if you will, of awakening. So sitting in a forest, sitting under a tree, practicing with the trees, having a tree as your companion in awakening is a, wonderful opportunity. Of course, we see what's happened in much of Tibet is that there's massive deforestation because there's been, so much, the forests were so wild, magnificent, and dense, and they've been stripped bare in whole areas of Tibet. But here, near Palpung Monastery, up around 13,000 feet, we're in this primordial, primary growth forest. Absolutely beautiful, and a place where you see prayer flags adorning the trees, as you see actually all over the parts of Tibet that are forested, where the trees are venerated. They're worshipped, they're appreciated, they're wrapped in prayer flags, they're, and I don't know exactly how to say this, but they're looked on, if you will, as elders. These are very old trees. Primary growth forests are comprised, of course, ancient trees, much older than all of us. If we took all of our ages and added them up, these trees are all older than all of us put together. So the fact that they have become venerables, that they have lasted for so long, continuing to give refuge as they do, makes them objects of deep appreciation in Buddhist culture. Well, trees, like mountains, exemplify stability. So we say in our practice, strong back, soft front, to have a spine that is like a tree, to have our sitting so deep and rooted like a tree, to have the crown of our head, if you will, like the crown of a tree, really open to the vastness of sky. So the tree and the mountain both are powerful symbols of meditation practice. So this is just a little something that I'd like to give you. And a little pen for you. And to thank you for inviting us into your wonderful tent. It was very cold and rainy out there. And to have tea with you was just... For me, this place and the practice that we did here today was the zenith of the whole pilgrimage. Why? Because we're going to a very high place, but we're going inside the womb of the earth. We're going in a tiger's lair. We're going into one of the three main caves of Padmasambhava, where, thousands of people have pilgrimaged and made offerings. And to have everyone assembled in this, beautiful and hallowed chamber, doing deep, deep meditation for many hours today. The stillness in the room was utterly profound. And I feel that what we've done in the 3 weeks up until now is to serve Tibetan people directly in terms of medical care. Now we're in the Sutra of the landscape. We're understanding what Dharma really means. And as I talked earlier about trees and being in forests, the actual word Dharma comes from the same root, D-H-E-R, as the word tree and truth. And we're here in the natural world, which is where the original sutras are. The tongue of the Buddha is the flowing river. The mountains are the meditating Buddhas. And we have a chance to be in a sky where the weather is constantly changing, but above it all is vastness, is boundlessness. And if we can just open ourselves up as we are, little by little, out of our self-centered, kind of selfish preoccupations, to see and perceive, be part of this magnificent sutra, my deep hope is that we'll not only go home with the intent to benefit Tibetans who are living tribally here, but in need of health care, but that we'll go home also with the intent to deeply revere our environment.
This is hard, maybe with the accumulation of the days, but I love it though. There's get this whole rhythm going. It's like music moving up the mountain. Just more deepening of just really being present and in this wild, beautiful landscape, phenomenal, and in this place of people who live in such sacred honoring of the space, of water sources, of mountains and caves, and they live with with awe of that. It's just so beautiful. And just the fantastic beauty is I can't even hold it at all. It's so beautiful.
You asked the question about why it's necessary to be detached in order to be a spiritual person. Actually, the word doesn't apply. It's not the correct word. The appropriate term would be non-attachment. Because, to be detached is to not care. And to be non-attached is to have a very different perspective, which is a perspective of non-grasping. So Roshi Enkyo and I were smiling about the question because the Buddha, who was born into a relatively comfortable circumstance, who had a harem, who had a son, ended up naming his son Rahula, which means fetter, and which means attachment, and something that weighs us down. And there's a very deep distinction in our Buddhist practice between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is something that everybody's going for in one way or another. and it inevitably leads to dissatisfactoriness. Happiness is an unconditional state, and that's a state that is satisfied with each thing exactly as it is. So that's why the word detachment doesn't exactly apply. It's more the experience of non-attachment. And in the practice of Zen Buddhism, this is particularly important because part of what we learn how to do is not to be attached to outcome, while at the same time we practice in order to free beings from suffering. We really long for all beings to be from suffering. We work for the benefit of others. I'm not addressing just seekers of spirituality. In fact, material possessions don't bring satisfaction. It's sort of like ice cream. You really long for a chocolate ice cream, and then you eat your ice cream and you have this moment of pleasure. You think, oh, I'll have another one. And then you eat another one and you think, that was just so fantastic. Maybe I'll have a third one. But the outcome is that you get kind of sick. And what happens when you try to assign your value in terms of your possessions, or the value of the deep world in terms of material possessions, it inevitably leads to deep unsatisfactoriness. So, I've known, a number of people who have everything in the world, materially speaking, but they're deeply unhappy. And I've known people who have nothing materially, and they're incredibly happy. And they're living, in a very tribal way and not necessarily under carrying out the spiritual ideal that you and I think is the spiritual ideal in terms of purity. But it really has to do with two things. One is to understand that consumerism and possessions actually have a deep effect on the well-being of beings everywhere. I mean, it's destroying our planet, our consumerism, and our egos are completely caught up in our possessions. And the second is to, ultimately, when you're dying, all these possessions aren't going to mean anything to you. You can't take them with you. I mean, yes, kings and pharaohs have been buried with their possessions, but that's at a sort of delusional level that we're talking about. So what we're really addressing here is, where is true satisfaction? And true satisfaction is in the heart. A Zen Buddhist everyday practice would be Zazen, sitting meditation. That's very important. Well, Zazen just means sitting practice. So it's a very simple, direct practice of being in the mentality of accepting everything just as it is. And it's, in a certain way, it's the most direct and unmediated of all practices. It's not involved in visualization or working on aspiration. It's simply developing a mind that is very brilliant, vivid, and clear, and absolutely reflective of things as they are. So it's a very unmediated state of mind. It's a kind of mind of choiceless awareness. One of the benefits of meditation is that it reduces stress, and there are a number of factors that are verifiable in this regard. And there are lots of stress-related illness, from cardiovascular to neurological. So, you have to find the sort of way in. If somebody's about to have a heart attack, is a perfect candidate for a heart attack, and you say, well, actually, meditation helps in the following ways. So the mindfulness-based stress reduction program that Jon Kabat-Zinn has developed is basically, shamatha meditation. And that's wonderful. It's a very skillful means. And so stress has been because so many people are stressed out, it's been a great avenue. I mean, sometimes, for example, arriving in Chengdu and you see all these high-rise apartments, or in New York, all these high-rise apartments, you realize all these little dramas that are going on in each one of these cubicles. And, you just, your heart kind of breaks because it all seems so terribly serious if you're inside the cubicle of that little world trying to survive. But what meditation ideally does is gives you a deep perspective and a vast view. They have to sit down, be still, and they have to use their mind to study their mind. It's important to know what's going on between your two ears, to know the content and the dynamic, and to actually let the mind stabilize so that you can have a very vivid, clear, high resolution and sustaining experience of attention. That's the only way you can see clearly, see the truth, see reality. Otherwise, you're living in this kind of paranoid self and other world. Nonviolence means fundamentally living in a way that one doesn't harm oneself or harm others. So, if you, for example, commit suicide, you're harming yourself. Or if you cut yourself, as many young people are doing in order to, feel some sense of out of the numbness, that's harmful. Or if you take substances which really harm the body or make you more deluded, that's violent. That's, a terrible problem in the world, whether it's, alcohol or other substances which really deepen the delusion. So, that's kind of the first stage, is to see, how are we harming in our own lives. And then the second stage is to see, what are we doing to harm the world? And that has to do with everything from the so-called exploitation of, quotes, natural resources, just damaging the earth through our consumption, to positing a world that is terrorizing us, and therefore we terrorize it. And, we breed terrorists everywhere.
Ta pami pamare pami pama pamare pami pamare pami pamare du jaga yu la pe trumang berang ze che de lo ju ji berang ze se wa ja yi de kusa jang gu chen bo pamare
But I'd like to separate out enlightenment and the issue of reincarnation. You know, just briefly, the issue of reincarnation is interesting. The Buddha didn't say that much about it, but it certainly is part of the Hindu perspective. It is very present, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism. It's not something in Zen that we attend to with any seriousness. I mean, we are reincarnating right in this very moment. I mean, that's really the point of our practice. Also, the notion of enlightenment, you can have some idea that down the road you'll be awake. What is enlightenment? That's a very powerful question. I like Norman Fisher's answer. He says enlightenment is being completely unselfish. I think that's a very simple and direct way. And Dogen Zenji said it very simply right now, you're already awake. Practice, precepts, enlightenment, actualization of the way, this circle of the way, you're already at this very moment, your mind ground is already free. You just have to recognize it. So, you know, some idea of getting somewhere is a bit of a nemesis. I mean, this moment, from the point of view of our practice, is where the power is, where the love is, where awakening is. The idea of an afterlife is also something that maybe, you know, it's part of ancestor worship, you know, in the Chinese and the Japanese world. The idea of reincarnation is part of the Hindu world. But again, I would say for a very sophisticated Buddhist practitioner, the idea of getting someplace is not where it's at. The idea of being here now is where the rubber meets the road. That's the essence of our practice.
Yeah, this is